see, hold on.
I'm at it.
Oh, what a hit. Nice hit. Nice fucking hit.
Damn.
Ladies and gentlemen, PepperBelly here, and welcome back to Squad, a game where the grass is green and erections are commonplace. Today, we will be talking. Fuck, man, my vocabulary has been diminished. I'm a little rusty here. It's been a while, right? So anyway, update 7, version 7, whatever you want to call it, for Squad has been released on Sunday at the beginning of this week. So I'm a little bit late to the party covering the update specifically. But basically, the one thing everybody has been wanting for Squad for the longest time, which is vehicles, have finally been added to the game. Now, I'm fairly certain most of you have already been playing it and are quite familiar with the fact that the vehicles are, you know, really fun and are a massive, massive game changer. They completely alter the way the game is played in a way that's pretty much what Project Reality instills. It's what we've been waiting for such a long time. Of course, we still have a long way to go because, you know, helicopters would be lovely. You know, me being an avid pilot in Project Reality, I'm really looking forward to being able to fly around a helicopter and transport troops, or potentially fly cast runs, and it's just, it's gonna be freaking glorious. But anyway, we have land vehicles, we got Humvees, we got BTRs, we got, you know, big ass trucks, Logi trucks, URL, whatever, you know, we got all the, well, actually that's pretty much technicals too. We got, you know, pickup trucks with the disc machine gun, I don't even know how people say that. It's like, some people just call it the Dishk, some people got the Dishka, some people, I don't even know. It's weird. But basically, it's a freaking machine gun, Russian made, pretty much the Russian equivalent of our M2 Browning 50 cal machine gun in pretty much NATO forces. And anyway, so we got vehicles, they handle great, they play great, there's not a lot of issues. Initially, there was a lot of problems, and there still are some. When the update came out, there was tons of lag issues, tons of crashing issues, which was even prevalent in the, like, public, or it wasn't even public, it was a private testing. You had to be, like, either invited. I only asked for it on Saturday, so I only was able to play for Saturday for, like, 5, maybe 4 hours, and then the next day, they released the update publicly, so I was like, oh, okay. But basically, all the issues I encountered during that kind of private testing phase was also prevalent in the actual full release. And unfortunately, it was kind of plaguing the game. A lot of people got mad, and it was, you know, a lot of the servers weren't even updating properly, or you tried to join them and you couldn't connect because the servers weren't actually, like, online. They would show up in the list, but they weren't actually available to join if you were to look on the Steam browser for Squad. It was really weird and finicky. They released 2 hotfixes up to this point. The first one sort of fixed some crashes. The second one pretty much fixed them all. I haven't crashed yet since I've actually downloaded the latest hotfix, but that's not to say it's fixed for everybody. There's still plenty of complaints of people even saying that things are worse. In addition, performance just tanked. Like, right now it's running fine for me after the 2 hotfixes, and I kind of deleted all the files, like everything associated. And you go into your app data folder and you delete Squad, and you delete everything that's even related to all the configuration files, everything. So everything just kind of is recreated from scratch. Set up your settings that way and play it, and so far things seem to be fine. Another thing to note is that when you upgrade to Windows 10 Anniversary Edition, by the way, the Anniversary update, it actually reverts a lot of your settings in the NVIDIA control panel, or maybe even if you have an ATI card, it might do the same thing there, or as an AMD card. It'll probably do the exact same thing, so it's kind of important to know that all your settings will be completely set to something terrible for actually what you need to make games run well. So if that's the case, remember to go to your NVIDIA control panel, or the AMD equivalent, and adjust the settings back to what you had previously, because for some reason Microsoft is just terrible at doing simple things to make things not ruin things. Whatever. Anyway, that's the whole other completely non-related discussion. So, performance tanked, and there were server issues, and now things seem to be settled, seem to be better. And let's actually talk about the update itself. So, of course, the vehicles changed the entire flow of the game. They've also altered movement. And I actually am very, very excited by the way they did and handled the way movement and inertia works, because they've changed the fact that you can no longer just enter or sprint at full speed. Now it's like you start off gradually picking up speed. They actually cut the initial acceleration rate by 50% to feel more realistic, to feel more like you actually have weight on you and you have to try to like pick up that speed as you're entering your sprint. Of course, it is possible to accelerate into a very quick sprint very quickly in real life, but more often than not, especially in a combat environment, you're going to slowly accelerate as you're... Anyway, it's just like the movement feels a tad bit more realistic. It has this weighty feel to it, which initially was off-putting to me because for some reason they removed the ability to strafe and sprint, so you can no longer look around effectively while you're sprinting. The only way to stay at a full peak sprint is to run straight. If you begin to strafe in a diagonal kind of direction, your character will kind of like lower the rifle in a way that Arma does it. If you guys are familiar with Arma 3, the way that you can actually have the tactical pace toggle, where you can be running and the weapon will lower slightly, and if you strafe back and forth while you're doing it, you'll see the weapon move all over your screen in kind of an annoying pattern. Essentially the same thing happens here now. So it's kind of weird, but I mean, you get used to it, and you got to realize that when they finally add free look, which is something they do have in the pipeline to add to the game, they plan on having free look, that will no longer be an issue. Currently it is, though. Currently it's a problem because you can't look around at your surroundings while you're running. And quite frankly, that's incredibly important when you're running around in the open fields. You want to be able to look left and right, especially in close quarters when you're crossing alleys or whatever the case may be, to be able to see what the hell is going on so you're not going to get surprised on the flank. Now, the coolest part about this, to me, is the fact that movement speed isn't just cut for acceleration. It's actually determined by the terrain you're actually traversing. So if you're running uphill, you'll move a lot slower. If you're going upstairs, you'll move slower. If you're cutting through thicker grass, you'll move slower. Like, every piece of the terrain actually affects your movement speed, your overall movement speed, your overall acceleration rate, everything like that, which is something I've always wanted to see put into a game. In fact, I would love to see this taken a step further at some point in the future, where the same way that terrain affects movement will affect weapon sway. So the less stable and thicker the terrain or whatever it is you're moving on will actually increase your weapon sway, since you're less balanced versus walking on flat, perfectly, you know, like a paved road would be ideal for keeping your accuracy while moving. But like walking through thick brush or walking on jagged rocks on the side of a mountain would obviously make your sight move more because you're less balanced. So there's going to be a lot more turbulence when you're taking steps. So something like that would be a lot better, because then positioning would also play a factor. Like in real life, you know, positioning is everything. Fire and movement is everything, and knowing how to take advantage of your terrain and positions greatly outweigh like a lot of just twitch shooting kind of mechanics and arcade features that a lot of shooters have. You actually have to account for a lot of other variables whenever those factors are in play, much like in real life. Now, of course, that kind of brings it a little bit further down the line of becoming more realistic and military sim-esque, but I mean, it's up to the developers. I don't think they're going to go that far, but I mean, it would be nice to see. In addition to all of that, they've also adjusted the animations for walking with your sights up, because before, the rear of the weapon would like wiggle back and forth while bouncing awkwardly, which wasn't like reflective of what would actually happen in real life, because in real life the stock is in your shoulder. So it pivoting, sliding back and forth, it just looked ridiculous. That was not exactly how things happen. And they changed it so it reflects more of what it actually looks like to kind of hold the weapon tightly in your shoulder as you're walking around, being all tactical and shit. And of course, the sway is still not as much as I think it would be, considering I can have a 4x optic pretty stationary on the move. Of course, it's not going to be as good as staying completely still, but the fact that I can reliably hit targets while walking around, strafing, you know, like, it just, I mean, they got to increase that sway. They got to make it somewhere between what Arma 3 did and Arma 2 did. Arma 2 was a little bit excessive. Arma 3 is kind of more in line of what actually happens when you're walking around with magnified optic. That would be something I'd like to see adjusted in the future, just to kind of reflect a more realistic approach to actually walking around. And of course, that can also play into the terrain you're traversing itself, because obviously being able to walk tactically in a close quarter environment, you can retain excellent accuracy, but walking outside in the grass, not so much. Now, one thing they've actually adjusted when it comes to movement, like I was saying earlier, you can no longer strafe and sprint. Instead, it is now just a faster shuffle run. So you can actually keep your optics or your iron sights up while strafing in a sprinting fashion. The sway does not increase whatsoever, but you're able to move at a more rapid pace. You cannot do this going forward, though. Now, this is something that got me kind of thinking, like, why not have 3 different movement speeds, right? Like, you have the slow walk, and then you can press shift, and you have a faster walk, and if you lower your optic, you enter a sprint. to me, that kind of makes more sense, considering you can actually shuffle run in each direction strafing. Whether or not that's intended, I don't know, but it seems to be somewhat intended, but you cannot move that pace forward, which is kind of like off-putting in certain circumstances, because I feel like when I'm closing the gap on a building, like let's say you're approaching from the tree line, you want to get to a building really quickly, but you want to be ready for potential targets on rooftops and windows or whatever. You want to have your optics up, or you want to have your sights up, you want to be ready, but you also want to move quickly. And you can't do both. Even though in real life, you very well can, right? You can move very quickly with your weapon up, ready to fire, and you can slow down when you need to take a better shot, or you can just suppress while you're on the move, or you can just completely come to a stop and then take that kill shot you absolutely need to do if the situation calls for it. Otherwise, you should be able to move rapidly with your sights up. And considering they already have it partially implemented with strafing, I don't see why they can't add it so that if your sights are up and you press shift while moving forward, it lets you kind of move at that accelerated shuffle pace, which would be, again, a lot better in my mind, because it would just add additional movement speeds, which just gives you a more intuitive, tactile feel for your character to be able to do exactly what you want. Now, of course, this would have to come with penalties. You know, you have to increase the sway when you're moving at that speed, because currently, when you're strafing and sprinting, there is no sway penalty. So they have to increase the sway. They have to increase the sway, period, right? Like, walking around, it is not that steady. They should increase it slightly, and then if you move at a faster pace, it's even higher. And then that would be, you know, perfect in my book. And then right then, you've already, like, nailed it home, and then you can focus on other things outside of movement. Lastly, when it comes to animations, they've also added inertia to the weapons themselves. You'll notice it kind of looks almost like free aim, where the weapon will kind of pivot left and right or up and down based on how fast you're turning around. Initially, again, when I first saw videos and I was looking at it and I finally played it, I thought it was bad. I was like, this isn't good. Why is this here? And after playing with it for a bit, you can tolerate it. It only really seems to come into effect when you're turning very, very quickly. But again, it's not exactly realistic or indicative of what actually happens when you're turning around with a weapon, because the weapon stays relatively straight, or you just lower it. But, I mean, you don't wiggle the muzzle ahead of your line of sight. That doesn't really make any sense. I guess it's just the developer's way, and I mean, a lot of games have actually done this. Even Arma 3 implemented this kind of feature where inertia's there. It's not exactly realistic. It's not, like I said, it's not indicative of what actually happens in real life. But it's a way of kind of artificially recreating what it feels like to have that weighty weapon inertia feel to it. Anyway, that pretty much does it for the main changes in the game. Other than that, they've also added brand new US soldier models, which look a lot nicer. They've also added brand new weapons, and of course, the brand new map, which you've been seeing throughout this entire gameplay. If you guys own the game, you should definitely check it out. My name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today, and I'll see you guys on the next one.